The midnight rain poured into the alley, and a corpse was quietly leaning against the corner. Long hair was blown away by the wind, revealing that thin white face, his head tilted weakly. The entire neck seemed to be broken with brute force by something, showing an exaggerated twist to death. But as a drop of rain invaded the white eyes, the broken bones made a crisp sound, and the dilated pupils showed signs of convergence. Thinking begins to reorganize and recover. At the same time, two restless voices sounded in his brain. Who am I? You are Ji Li. Who are you? I am also Ji Li. We are all Ji Li. We are all seasons. We are all seasons. The chaotic voice stirred in his mind, and the body suddenly tightened with a sound of stimulation, and then stood up and turned over a raindrop. Hey! Ji Li, died, and then lived again. Failed. Spit out a mouthful of white mist, Ji Li rubbed his swollen neck, those grey eyes looked at the world in the rain, and washed away his confusion after his resurrection. After a while, he took a violent step and yelled at the voice in his mind, "Shut up!" The world in his mind is quiet, and Ji Li is also quiet. From the dirty alley into the bright city, his pace is getting faster and faster, running in a certain direction, the neon lights stretched his back longer and longer. In a trance, there are three shadows on the ground. Shenming City, across the moat. Ji Li silently looked at a public toilet in front of him, as if he was groaning. After a while, he reached out and pushed open the small door. In an instant, the world changed. Behind the door is not a toilet, but a luxuriously decorated hotel lobby. Under the bright lights, the golden light illuminates Ji Li's pale face, and the appropriate warm air quickly dries the drenched clothes. He looked at the 17 black and white portraits hanging in the center of the golden hall, which were extremely incompatible with the surrounding environment, and remained silent. Congratulations to Tianhai Hotel, the agent manager of the number 7 shop, and Mr. Ji Li for the successful return. Although you haven't completed the enticement mission, you can still choose to rest and enjoy a cup of warm tea to resist the cold of the autumn rain. Ji Li waved his hand and interrupted the sweet female voice on the radio, and walked to the left staircase with a bad face. I just broke my neck by that thing, and it still hurts. Can I find a massage? Master character? Master character? Are you still there? Ji Li's brain, the previous voice started chattering again. He frowned and ignored it. Since waking up here 6 months ago, losing all his memories, he has died twice. Although he can resurrect unscathed every time, the price is that there will be an extra personality in his mind. Up to now, his soul has been cut into 3 parts if he counts the master character. After losing his memory, he couldn't remember anything. Even the name Ji Li was the only word left in his mind the moment he woke up. So he was sure that he was called Ji Li, but he was not sure if he was a normal person. Hey! Ji Li's thinking was interrupted, and a large amount of scarlet blood suddenly appeared on the carpet under his feet, which was so sticky that it became a piece. 205. 205. Will you be in the bathtub after cutting your wrist? The blood is leaking out of the door. As soon as he said this, the blood stains on the carpet suddenly showed signs of reduction, and he withdrew from the corridor into the crack of the door. Just as Ji Li turned his head, he heard the bounce of glass marbles in the depths of the corridor. He squinted his eyes and looked carefully. In the corridor corresponding to 210, an unmanned glass marble was jumping up and down. 210. Go back to my room. A flash of lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the second floor of the hotel. Shown on Ji Li's extremely gloomy face, and a headless figure beside door 210 was also reflected in a daze. After patrolling 10 rooms, Ji Li finally returned to his room on the 3rd floor. He took off his damp coat and slumped feebly on the chair, his pale face illuminated by the fluorescent computer screen. Tianhai Hotel is a weird hotel hidden in the world. Half a month ago, Ji Li, who lost everything, awoke from here. The hotel was empty at the time. The moment he woke up, there was a female voice on the hotel radio. "Welcome Mr. Ji Li to enter the 7th branch of Tianhai Hotel and become the agent manager. Your responsibilities are twofold: introduce new residents to move in, and supervise residents to prevent escape. The referral task is currently only for you. When the task appears, the specific content will be sent to the official mailbox of the hotel. Please register and log in within 5 minutes for future check." The task of supervising the residents: after the residents move in, only the staff in the store will check every night to prevent them from escaping from the hotel. At present, the number 7 shop belongs to the lowest ordinary hotel level, and the distance is upgraded to a 1-star hotel, which requires 3 residents to be attracted. Hotel levels are divided into normal, 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, and 5-star. The upgrade of the hotel is based on the number of residents. Every time a new level is reached, the corresponding welfare rules will be added to the staff of the branch where they are located. Upon reaching the level of 5-star hotel, all employees of the branch will leave the sky and regain their freedom. Please do your best to complete the task and upgrade your hotel. Is just such a few words. It is the only voice Ji Li hears after waking up. At the same time, he saw a brand new mobile phone on the ground under his feet. The screen was still on. It was a registration and login page. Any normal person will not follow this inexplicable hotel order. Ji Li is the same, so he discovered the ability to come back from the dead for the first time. His choice was to skip the phone and walked out of the hotel door. The moment I opened the door, I saw the moat in Shanming City in front of me, but behind it was a simple public toilet. The door was open, and the golden light of the magnificent hotel was shining inside the public toilet door. Ji Li couldn't believe her eyes. But this weird sight represents a kind of horror that Ji Li has never seen before. At the same time, the hotel's female voice prompts it to register the mailbox within 5 minutes. Ji Li's inaction was at the cost of being burned by the fire, and instantly turned into a mass of ashes. This was his first death, and it was also the beginning of his second personality resurrection. He returned to the hotel with no choice, picked up his mobile phone to register, and became the agent manager of the 7th branch of Tianhai Hotel. During that whole day, Ji Li's life was completely overturned. He thought he was just a poor man who lost his memory, but when he died, he was reborn again, and the second personality came back from his body. He suddenly realized that he is not a normal person. There are not many official instructions from the hotel, and even the identity of the residents of the link is not informed. It was the 17 black and white portraits on the wall of the hall that really let Ji Li understand the situation at the moment. This is the former store manager of Tianhai Hotel. They died without exception. But in the corner of each portrait, I wrote the unspoken rules of the hotel with a hard pen, including the tragic death of them one by one, and the details of the task. After digesting all the rules, it also completely shattered Ji Li's worldview. There is light and darkness in this world, and there are ghosts when there are people. For humans, ghosts cannot hurt or fight. Can be regarded as a natural enemy. But the 2 tasks of Tianhai Hotel are to force humans to face ghosts. Recruitment mission: they need to go to a ghostly place to pick up the ghosts and move in. Daily supervision: patrol every night to prevent ghosts staying in the hotel from escaping outdoors. The past generations of shopkeepers and clerk who entered the hotel, without exception, none of them were voluntary. They were all drawn into the hotel as staff inexplicably, like a season ceremony. From then on, the task was forced. Hotels are the highest level of existence for living people and even ghosts. Everything it explains, it can't be rejected, otherwise it would be sudden death. This is like a curse. From the moment you enter the hotel, the seeds have been planted. Judging from the lettering on the edge of the portrait, it's not that no one tried to escape, but all ended in tragic death. Was the same as the previous Ji Li's failure to execute the login mailbox command, and was instantly destroyed by an unknown fire. But none of them have such special and mysterious physical attributes as Ji Li, so they can start again. However, the directing task that almost killed the number 7 branch was the most difficult of the two tasks. But there are still some outstanding shopkeepers, who survived for a long time, and completed several tasks to attract ghosts. And they kept the direction of completing the task. A ghost can kill people, but there are still restrictions and rules. This sentence was kept in mind by Ji Li, especially after he went through the task of receiving in the future. He also summarized it. All ghost killings need to follow specific rules, just find out the rules and crack them. Then they can no longer attack a living person, and at the same time, it is considered as a successful capture. Bring them back to the hotel to complete the task. But even so, the death rate is still extremely high. Counting the time he just failed, he went through 3 receiving tasks and died again. The two ghosts 205 and 210 are the only results in the past half a month. As for the 5-star hotel to get rid of the rules of Tianhai, Ji Li still can't imagine. Judging from the engraving of the portrait, in the past, the highest level of the 7th store in the past was only 6 ghosts and reached the 2nd star. But when it just became a 2-star hotel, it was completely wiped out. Ji Li has guessed, maybe every time the hotel reaches a new level, the ghosts you have to face will be even more terrifying. Even with the increase in welfare, it is impossible to fight. This makes Ji Li completely dare not to imagine whether it is something that can be done to reach the 5-star level and attract 18 ghosts. Ding dong! The computer screen is highlighted, and a new mail pops up from the lower right corner. Ji Li rubbed his neck in anguish, sighed and then clicked to read. Recipient, Tianhai Hotel, Number 7 Agent Store Manager Ji Li. Please go to the begging alley in Zikan District at midnight on October 21, 2015, find a way out and pick up the new residents back to the hotel within 3 hours. This is the task of upgrading the hotel to a star. If completed, the number 7 shop will be upgraded to a 1-star hotel. The benefits of this level of hotel are: expand the recruitment of shop assistants. Sender, Tianhai. Ji Li hasn't spoken yet, but the second personality in his mind has already become louder. Yu reading www.yuganchu. CM what's a hotel? Keep sending me emails and ask me to pick up some residents. What should I pick up? What is the ghost tenant? The third personality that had just emerged whispered. A ghost is a ghost, a murderer. Ji Li was so loudly quarreled by them that he slapped the table suddenly. Shut up all. He raised his head and sighed. In fact, the mission that just failed was already a promotion mission. It seems that due to the particularity of his inability to die, Tianhai's rules have changed. But the benefits of promotion is that the expansion of clerk recruitment makes him very happy. From his point of view, the reason why he failed last time was because he was always fighting alone. If there are other helpers, at least the probability of a ghost attack can be evenly divided. A long time later, Ji Li was still staring at the computer whose screen had already been turned off, and raised his arm with a gloomy expression. A black dotted line appeared in the middle of the white arm, as if it indicated some kind of division. Ji Li slowly closed his eyes, and he could feel that his vitality was gradually weakening after each resurrection, and he was not far from complete death. He struggled desperately, just trying to find a truth. What is the lost memory? Who gave him the power to come back from the dead? Why did he wake up in Tianhai Hotel? Behind all this, there is obviously a pair of huge black hands covering it. And this is obviously a conspiracy of supernatural forces, so he has to think of the Tianhai Hotel, which is also terrifying. Seasonal gifts are different from previous store managers. He lives, not just to live. At 11:45 on October 31, Shanming City was still brightly lit, and many people's nightlife had just begun. Inside the taxi, Ji Li's eyes were shrouded in grey, and he was silent while watching the scene flashing by outside the window. Until the cigarette on my hand burned out and my finger was burned, I could pull it away from the trance. It's about a few minutes' drive from the email address posted by the hotel. Ji Li can be said to be a starting point. After a long illness, he became a doctor. He fought against ghosts several times, and he was considered an expert. Although the supernatural location has been designated in the begging alley, under normal circumstances, it must not be entered in advance. Otherwise it is very likely to cause an early attack by ghosts, and at that time the mission has not yet started, and he has to face a lifeless death. I remember. The two personalities who never spoke along the way broke the silence. Is talking about the third personality that has just emerged. I am not called Ji Li. I should be called Ji Li. I am hypnotizing a patient. Why did I suddenly run into your body? Don't be ridiculous, you are called Ji Li, we are all Ji Li. Impossible. Ji Li scratched his head dumbly. The second personality is manic and vulgar, and has no extra memory. This third personality hasn't said anything since its appearance yesterday, and now it seems to be somewhat unique. But now he didn't have time to think about it. The taxi came to a halt in an empty alley. The driver turned his head and grinned, "Brother, the begging alley is here." Ji Li dusted the soot from his body, took out a piece of cash from his arms and handed it over. Without looking for money, he got off the car with a tool bag. Everything is closed, this time I will think about the future after surviving. The third personality was not talking, and the second personality fell silent appropriately. Now in this dark alley at midnight, only Ji Li's footsteps are left. In the deep alley, only a street lamp in the center barely brings a gleam of light. There are no people on both sides, all walls are piled of bricks and stones. It takes almost 10 meters to walk to see a dilapidated and locked wooden door. Begging to eat in Hutong, Ji Li has never heard of it before. He has searched many records about Hutong before, but he has not found any mysterious rumors. Seeing the sparse appearance of this person made his heart feel slightly cooler. This occasion seems to be a haunted place by nature. Ji Li raised his wrist and glanced at his watch. It was 11:58 midnight, only 2 minutes before the ghost appeared. As soon as he put down the backpack on his shoulders, he heard a roaring noise coming from behind. 6. I really drank too much today, can you still find a home? Cut, I am more awake than you, I can still walk straight. You two slow down, slow down. Ji Li frowned, he saw 3 shaky figures walking behind him, 3 drunks. There will be ghosts in only 2 minutes, and the entire alley will become a place of evil. At this time, outsiders will disrupt the situation and the mission will definitely change. Ji Li's worries were not expressed, and he didn't even try to stop the 3 of them, just watching them get closer and closer. Hey, they are really unlucky, but it's a good thing for us. The second personality laughed abruptly. Who? Ji Li suddenly felt a cold in his neck, and an unexplained cold wind suddenly blew past, and he turned his head abruptly as if he had sensed something. Everything in front of me is completely different from what I have seen before. Under the dim street lamp, a sky full of yellow paper was lifted up, and a group of people wearing linen and filial piety, carrying a coffin, slowly marched towards the position of Ji Li and others without saying a word. Did I drink too much? A funeral in the middle of the night. A bloated man said blankly. 6 sons, this is a big deal. Let's turn our heads quickly. The lanky face that was supporting him changed. Except for Ji Li, the 3 drunks all evacuated towards the alley, but he looked at everything but never stopped. The mission has already begun, they can't get out of this alley. The funeral procession was getting closer and closer. Ji Li listened to the dull footsteps of those people, and set his eyes on the coffin. How will the ghost appear this time? Is not just a coffin, this group of people in linen is also very weird, each of them looks like white paper, and their body proportions are exceptionally similar, as neat as they are carved out of a mold. As the distance continued to shrink, Ji Li held his bag tightly against the wall with one hand, and watched with breathlessness as the person leading the head had passed by him, but he ignored him. Ignore. This deepens the weirdness in Ji Li's heart. The mission is only less than 5 minutes from the beginning, and he is still in the exploratory stage at present. He looked at the few people headed by the white flags, and they posted so close that he couldn't even hear the slightest gasping. Aren't they all human? And just at this moment, the 3 drunks who had left before ran back again profusely, looking at Ji Li, who had been mixed with the funeral procession, dumbfounded. This, really hit a ghost? Why can't I find the exit at all? The fat man named Liuza yelled eagerly. Plop! At the moment when the 6 sons spoke, the entire funeral procession stopped instantly, and the person carrying the coffin threw the coffin on the ground, and everyone stared at the 6 sons. Ji Li frowned. Could it be that the man's words touched something? 6 sons almost fell to the ground with a sound. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Both sides were tall and thin, and another man with yellow hair quickly supported him. Don't talk too much, don't talk too much. The tall and thin man has a stronger psychological quality, and he nodded and apologized quickly. After standing in place for a long time, the funeral team raised the coffin again and continued to move forward, turning a blind eye to Ji Li, and heading forward to meet the 6 sons and others. Funeral at midnight. Halfway through the funeral procession, it seems to be leaving the begging alley. 6 sons leaned against the corner with their stomachs shuddered, shivering constantly. He was frightened as he watched the puppet-like people in white passing by. His heart raised his throat. Fortunately, it seemed that they didn't pay attention to him. He wiped a sweat, and looked at the coffin lifters nearby and let out a sigh of relief. When these people walked over, he was at ease. Thought this in his heart, but still looked curiously at the solid black solid wood coffin, and then at the person carrying the coffin. 6 children cried out strangely, as if they had discovered something unreasonable, and scratched their heads. But then, a small noise appeared. His mung bean big eyes stared round, his sight was instantly swallowed, and then he completely stepped into the dark abyss. S mouth opened to the largest extent, but his throat seemed to be blocked, barely squeezing out a few words. How do I? Then, his unfinished words disappeared in place with his fat body. When the tall and thin guy reacted with the yellow hair, they only felt the scalp numb. The 6 sons of disappeared without a trace from under their eyelids in an instant, and there was only a piece of yellow paper left where they were originally. Ji Li's feeling of weirdness became stronger and stronger. He always felt that there was something wrong with the funeral procession, but he couldn't tell. Then, he heard a heart-piercing scream, and it was those drunks who came from there. Without hesitation, he ran away immediately. On the way, he saw the original 3 drunks, but now only 2 are left. The fat man who drank the most is nowhere to be seen. Ji Li's eyelids twitched, and he immediately understood that the first deceased had appeared. The tall and thin man and Huang Mao have no master at this moment. They can only look at Ji Li and then at the funeral procession that is blurred, and they can't say a word. Ji Li grabbed the slender and obscure man, and asked in a low voice, "What happened just now?" The tall and thin man pointed at the stone wall where the 6 sons were in a daze and horrified, trembling. 6 sons, 6 sons he. Ji Li pushed him away impatiently and turned to look at Huang Mao. Huang Mao can be regarded as the most sober of the 3 present. He breathed a long breath of relief, and glanced taboo at the funeral procession that had disappeared and said softly, "We are hiding here, waiting for those people to leave, just a turn of our heads." 6 sons disappeared directly in place, until now we don't know what happened. Disappear suddenly. Ji Li's heart shuddered, and he asked quickly, "Is it all?" Huang Mao has a lingering fear, but he is puzzled. He faintly said, "Before he disappeared, I only heard 3 words. How do I? That's it. That's it." Ji Li's face was pale, and he wondered as he watched the funeral procession going away. The murder of 6 sons must have triggered a dead end. Maybe the last words he saw before he died and the last words that are not counted as last words will reveal some clues. But everything is too vague to memorize. Things will not be that simple, those people will definitely come back and kill us all. Just as these words fell in my heart, the funeral procession that had disappeared in the hutong once again showed up, quickly approaching in the direction of Ji Li and others. Was tall and thin with the eye of a ghost, and was about to flee backwards, but Ji Li grabbed his wrist and forced him to stay here. If you can't run out, you may have a chance to stay and find its killing rules. Ji Li said, looking at the team getting closer and closer. What is it? Ghost. The tall and thin guys glanced at Huang Mao, and they all took a step back. They looked at Ji Li as if they were looking at a neuropathy. But they didn't escape. Maybe they all realized subconsciously that there are supernatural things among those in white clothes. When the funeral procession approached for the first time, I always paid attention to everyone's actions. Until the death of the sixth son, I can be sure that the white-clothed man has no chance to make a move. Then, perhaps the real abnormality is the coffin. This is the second collision between a living person and a funeral procession. Now Ji Li's attention is all on the coffin. As the distance shortened, he still didn't notice any abnormalities. At least from the outside, the coffin is heavy, and there is obviously a corpse inside. Hey? Did you see that the weight of the coffin has changed? Just when Ji Li was at a loss, the third personality appeared in his mind, a slightly puzzled voice in the cold. Hiss. The rope on the shoulder of the man who carried the coffin has fallen a little bit more than before. Ji Li's eyes lit up, and he followed the words of the third personality. As he said, he passed by this time. The shoulders of the 4 coffin bearers were pulled into the flesh by ropes, and their steps were much heavier than before. Where did the corpse of the 6 sons go? This question suddenly appeared in Ji Li's mind, and his thinking began to boldly extend. Generally speaking, ghosts do not do things aimlessly. Every detail is about life and death. 6 sons died when they died, why did the corpse disappear? But if you think of the increased weight of the coffin, is there a possibility that the coffin now contains the 2 corpses of ghosts and 6 sons? Ji Li looked at the coffin that was getting closer and closer, and he clearly felt a chill that shocked his mind. 6 sons died, obviously because they saw something, so look at it from where they were at the time. He should be very close to the location of the coffin. Ji Li took a breath of air. Everything is abnormal, it is linked to the coffin. In this way, the secret of the coffin is the deepest. If you want to find a clue, you must expose this secret. Ji Li's gaze flickered, and it didn't take a moment for the coffin to pass by his position. This was his rare opportunity. But it is still unclear whether opening the coffin is a way of life or death. Several deaths made him walk on thin ice every step. He slowly turned his head and looked at the 2 chilling men beside him. If he wants to pay the least price to achieve his goal, the easiest way is of course to use the people around him. 2. I can tell you frankly that the death of the 6th son was killed by the ghost in the coffin. The tall and thin man shrank his neck abruptly, and the look in Ji Li's eyes became more alarmed. Huang Mao's psychological quality is much better than him, and after a few struggles, he asked, "What do you mean?" Ji Li Chong breathed a sigh of relief, faintly said, "Everyone in this alley has been targeted by it, only to find out its killing rules, maybe we still have a chance to live." Then, his conversation turned, looking at Huang Mao and the tall and thin man, he took out 2 sharp knives from his bag and threw them in front of them. "Give you a choice, believe me, just pick up the knife and we lift the lid of the coffin from all directions at the same time." Quiet. There was a brief stagnation in the scene following Ji Li's words, and the air was filled with dazedness and horror. "No. No. Even if what you said is true, the ghost is in the coffin, we are going to open the coffin and we will die." The thin and tall man clings to the wall tightly, retorting with a low growl. Ji Li squinted his eyes and said nothing, but Huang Mao picked up the sharp knife first. He was right, the 6 sons died tragically without reason, all these are supernatural powers. At the location of death at that time, only 6 children were closest to the coffin, and all the sources must be on the coffin. Huang Mao's psychological quality and calm head have to some extent kept up with the professional of Ji Li. He was sweating profusely, holding the knife and looking at Ji Li. "Are you sure, if we open the coffin, will we find the rules of ghost killing?" Ji Li nodded heavily, and his hand also climbed to the back of the waist, tightening the hilt of the knife. His gaze fell on the coffin that was about to arrive. The difference from the last time he passed was that he smelled a strange smell after close contact. The smell of death. This kind of taste, he has experienced more than once. It all comes from himself. Looked at the coffin, which was swaying up and down and was obviously not light in weight. He was almost 80% sure that the body of the 6th son was in the coffin. In response to Huang Mao's question, his tone was very light, but with indescribable confidence. "There are ghosts hidden in the coffin, but there are also homicide rules. As long as we overcome fear and master this hidden rule, we can definitely win this time." Ji Li was holding the handle of the knife. Instead of looking at the position of Huang Mao and the tall and thin man, he went straight to a certain corner of the wall. At this position, he was facing the southeast corner of the coffin. At the same time, after several hesitations, Huang Mao chose to stand parallel to the left side of Ji Li, facing the northeast corner of the coffin. The thin and tall one chose to stand beside Huang Mao. He has no confidence, especially after looking at the group of people in white with facial expressions. His legs trembled vigorously. Ji Li Yuguang saw all this, and the corner of his mouth evoked a secret smile. He did not speak, but a slight sigh of third personality sounded in his mind. "If you do this, you undoubtedly pushed these two to a dead end. The plan is very good. Opening the coffin is indeed a good way to take the initiative, but the risk is also high. If you want to find out the hidden rules of killing, you must first see the killing. You use the 2 reasons of courage and survival to force them to join your action, just to equalize the murder probability of ghosts. We'll treat you 100%, down to 30%. I have said everything, and I can see that the wisdom of the third personality is better, and I can see Ji Li's intention almost instantly. All the sounds have disappeared, and the living and ghosts are looking for an opportunity." At this moment, the coffin came quietly. Ji Li held a knife in his right hand, but watched the coffin pass by, and did not immediately make a move. When the length of the coffin had reached the side of the 3 living people, he suddenly said, "It's now." Huang Mahi is tall and thin, like a thunder in his ears. He subconsciously stabbed the knife in his hand towards the position of the coffin lid. But only Ji Li, but never moved. He ordered the 2 to act, but he stayed out. The third personality guessed wrong. This plan Ji Li didn't even think about participating in it. What he wants to see is that these 2 people are opening the coffin. It is also them who trigger the dead end. The probability of Ji Li being attacked is basically 0. But the yellow hair and the tall thin knife have not reached the coffin lid at the same time. Ji Li suddenly heard a muffled noise. Didn't realize what sound it was. His eyes were suddenly reflected by some kind of strong light, and they closed together subconsciously, losing his vision for a moment. Ji Li's heart suddenly twitched, and he just realized that he was about to flee. But he found that his left arm was pinched by a icy palm, and his whole body was bitten by a poisonous snake, completely losing his resistance. A huge force for no reason, from the palm of the hand, it slammed. Ji Li has no ability to fight back, and the whole person falls toward the position of the coffin. The attack on his side was too hasty to react, but he was always alert to the thin and tall people and yellow hairs around him, and he saw what was happening for the first time. The tall and thin man was completely frightened. He watched the coffin. When he passed Ji Li, the lid of the coffin was pushed away from the inside. Something lit up immediately, and a bloodless arm stretched out inside, forcibly pulling Ji Li. He shivered back 2 steps and then followed the wall, but his eyes looked at the open coffin uncontrollably. Immediately afterwards, his pupils suddenly shrank, as if he had discovered something terrifying. but absolutely shouldn't happen. The yellow hair on the other side has no idea about the thin and tall one. He was the closest to Ji Li. Seeing the accident happened, he subconsciously hugged Ji Li's body to prevent death from coming. Things happened extremely fast, only within half a second. But with the source of the yellow hair's power, Ji Li seemed to finally have a moment of reaction time. The knife prepared in advance was immediately raised, aimed at his left wrist, and slammed. Suddenly he saw the opened coffin through the street lamp, but couldn't see the dark scene inside. Only one hand stretched out from the coffin, and it was grasped on his wrist like iron tongs. And just as the knife was about to be cut off, reading www.yuyuganshu.com, Ji Li's hair was standing straight. There was a tragic scream from the thin and tall man. And a warning that I don't know what it means. Don't look at it. Tall and thin, died. When the ritual was pulled into the coffin, he was extremely coincidentally and inexplicably replaced. Ji Li saw the tall and thin man turned into a black shadow and was forcibly pulled into the coffin, and then heard a plop. The ghost no longer attacked him, and the coffin lid closed instantly, but there was a heart-piercing pain from the joint of his left hand, and he gritted his teeth to look. The heavily closed coffin lid is pressing his left hand. The pain came like a tide, and the madness in his eyes expanded. No one pays attention to the death of the thin and tall man and the prompt at this time. The coffin was still moving, and with great strength, Ji Li's left hand held Ji Li and dragged him along with Huang Mao. Ji Li began to have blood stains on the skin below his left wrist, and the flesh was crazily rubbed off. His eyes were filled with blood red, and the knife finally hovered to its limit, and suddenly fell from the air. Is inserting into the left wrist that has been crushed by the coffin lid, cutting the hard bones again and again. Cut off his hand to survive. The sour sound is the only change in the entire alley, which has brought the tragedy of this place to another height. The two remaining living people completely lost all their strength and fell to the side of the road, watching the life-swallowing coffin go further and further along with the white-clothed man. Ji Li was the second person to be attacked, but he did not die. And the price is his left hand, and the tall and thin man who died for unknown reasons, were all locked in the coffin. Xiao Wu! Xiao Wu! Huang Mao leaned against the corner of the wall, screamed and screamed at the funeral procession that had gone away, calling his dead friend. The craziness in Ji Li's eyes diminished, but he was immediately occupied by the ferocious, his right hand clinging to his broken left wrist. There is blood flowing there, with uneven cross-sections and a lot of dust. He gritted his teeth and ignored Huang Mao's yelling. He just opened the backpack with one hand, took a bottle of water from it and poured it on the wound, and then simply bandaged it. The process is so fast, it seems that this is not the first time he has cut his hand to survive. You. The third personality in his mind can see and feel everything about Ji Li, and it is a little flustered at the moment. Leave it alone. All injuries in the mission can be completely repaired the moment they return to the hotel. The key now is how to find a way out in the next attack. Otherwise everyone trademark will go to see God. The voice of the second personality yelled wildly. Ji Li listened to the dialogue between the two personalities in his mind, while hurriedly processing the current useful information. In this second confrontation, he thought he had a chance to win. Using the two of Huang Mao, he opened the coffin without any blood. But who could have imagined that the plan did not change quickly, and Ji Li, who had not done anything at all, became the first person to be attacked. After broke his hand, he suffered a heavy loss, but he has not been gloomy since then, because he also got a lot of clues. He personally encountered the offensive of a ghost. This ghost's method of killing is to pull the living person into the coffin through unstoppable force in a very short time. But the method of killing is not important at all. The key is how Ji Li triggered a dead end invisibly. The coffin. The term appeared in his mind for the first time, 3 victims. All the sources are on the coffin. Lu Ziyi and Ji Li were attacked because of observing the coffin, including the tall and thin man who died suddenly. Although Ji Li was in an urgent situation at the time, he still heard the scream of the thin and tall man before he died. Don't look at it. It obviously represents the coffin. This is extremely critical information. Now the three people who have been attacked have one thing in common, stared at the coffin. This is not difficult to understand, Ji Li came to this conclusion almost in a breath. The tall and thin man became a surrogate for some reason during the attack on Ji Li, but now looking at Ji Li, he should be able to infer the situation at that time. As he and Huang Mao put all their minds on wrestling, the tall and thin person who is idle will definitely stare at the weird coffin. But just looking at the coffin will not constitute a dead end, because Huang Mao has also seen it. Ji Li suddenly thought that when everyone was attacked, there was a muffled sound of the coffin lid opening, maybe. The tall and thin man was in the opened coffin. He saw something, and it was precisely because he looked at him that he formally triggered a dead end. In other words, the real dead end is to look straight at something in the coffin. Ji Li long breathed a sigh of relief. The pain of his severed hand continued to torture his nerves, but it made his active thinking once again invigorated. He slowly leaned against the wall, straightened up, and looked at the bewildered and frightened Huang Mao on the ground without a word. I need to be sure, what is the dead end thing in the coffin? Dead, all dead. The yellow hairs groaned intermittently in the dead alley, mixed in the wind and looked particularly desolate. Ji Li sighed and patted him on the shoulder, but his body trembled. It was obvious that this man had become a frightened bird. Now only you and me are left, I just want to ask you, do you want to live? Ji Li's words carry a certain magic, but there is a hope in the hoarse throat, the hope of living. The corners of Huang Mao's mouth twitched, he stared at the handsome, but cold temperament man in front of him, and nodded in silence for a while. Ji Li took a deep look at him and said softly, use your phone and add my VX. The number is. Although Huang Mao's face was at a loss, but at this moment, it can be said to be omnipotent to Ji Li, without saying anything to do according to his instructions. The funeral procession in the distance, once again heard the footsteps of Ji Lulu. It seems that the third round of confrontation is about to come. Ji Li still can't see the panic on his face. Holding the cell phone in his bloodied right hand, he quickly passed his friends and started a video call with Huang Mao. The second plan I am talking about will save your life. He glanced at the man in white who was getting closer, stared at the closed coffin, and said, when the coffin is approaching again, you close your eyes and don't look at it, and place your phone on your chest facing the coffin. Huang Mao was stunned, that's it. Ji Li nodded, that's it. Although the last action failed, it was considered a success. At least he already knows that the deadened thing in the coffin will emerge on its own. As long as Ji Li turned his back to the coffin and started a video call with Huang Mao, he could see the moment the coffin was opened, what did the living person die because of looking directly at him? This is the best way to avoid dead ends. Is getting closer, getting closer. The expressionless white-clothed crowd still looks the same. The descendants stepped on the footprints of their predecessors and walked away. The coffin at the end shook, and the weight became heavier as the taller one entered. The third confrontation between the living and the ghost begins abruptly. The first 2 seasons were defeated, and this time he didn't believe he would repeat the same mistake again. Ji Li held his phone against the wall, staring at the video screen, watching the coffin slowly arrive. The yellow-haired body trembled, and the palm of his hand holding the phone was shaking constantly, causing the picture to become a little blurry and swaying. But these are not important, because Ji Li is almost certain that as long as he knows what is in the coffin, he can definitely find his way out. The phone creaked in Ji Li's palm, and it was only a ray of life away. The coffin arrived abruptly in this extremely high-pressure atmosphere, and Huang Mao's hands shook more and more. By the faint light of the street lamp, Ji Li heard a weird and familiar sound. The coffin lid was opened. Sure enough, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com ghosts still can't help it. In the screen of the mobile phone, the blurry scene reveals a gap, which is filled with pitch black and forest, and Ji Li's eyes are all staring out. And when he saw something like that exposed in the lid of the coffin, there was an unprecedented surprise in his eyes. Inside the phone screen, a black frame and white background mirror appeared in the coffin, and there was a black ribbon around the frame. This is a frame of a portrait, but there is no portrait at all. The surface is just a layer of glass. But what really shocked Ji Li was, in the original blank frame, black lines appeared, and a face was quickly outlined. That is the face of yellow hair. Except for black and white, there is no color, just like. Huang Mao became the owner of the portrait in the frame, and at the same time became the dead man who should be in that coffin. Ji Li's scalp was numb, and when he finally saw this moment, he woke up. What a terrible mistake he had made. The thing in the coffin is an empty frame. But a dead end, it's not looking straight at the frame of the mirror at all. But, as long as the face is irradiated by the frame, the portrait will be imprinted, and there is no doubt that you will die. And at this moment, he suddenly heard a scream of Huang Mao from behind, and then stopped abruptly. His ending is self-evident. But the matter did not end because of Huang Mao's death. The phone screen, which was still flashing fluorescent, fell to the ground with his death. Was extremely coincidentally, exposing the front of the screen to the air. And Ji Li's pale and bloodless face, due to the video call that has not been hung up, immediately overlaps with the frame. A dead end corresponds to a way of life. Once the dead end speculation fails, then what awaits the living will be a terrible situation that will never be restored. Ji Li's two active attacks before and after the plan were not wrong. Except for the vague death of the 6 sons, there was a buffer period between his attack and the death of the tall and thin man. And the words of the thin and tall man before his death gave him an illusion. Don't look at it, this is a living person's active observation of the frame. From the standpoint of a tall and thin man, the first target of the frame was Ji Li. In the chaos, following his attention, the frame guessing shifted, and he scanned his face. Is also at that time, the thin and tall man was photographed, cursed, and died. So, he subconsciously thought that it was his own line of sight observation that caused him to trigger a dead end. Ignored the fact that the frame turned on its own. Is also precisely because of this illusion prompt, pushing Ji Li's reasoning into the abyss. That's why he attributed his dead end to looking directly at the frame of the living person. But Huang Mao closed his eyes tightly and did not take the initiative to look at the frame, so a more terrifying conjecture came into being. The real dead end, as long as the face is scanned by the frame of the frame and portrayed as a portrait, it is bound to die. After thinking about everything, Ji Li shuddered suddenly, as if he realized something. The video call is still not closed. Huang Mao wanted to photograph the coffin, so he turned on the rear camera. After his death, his phone naturally fell to the ground. And now the scene of Ji Li's mobile phone screen is completely dark. This means that the screen with his face is exposed to the air. Ji Li's scalp is about to explode. He was about to throw his phone out, but the moment he lowered his head subconsciously, he happened to see an empty frame on the opposite side of the screen. The frame of the picture came out of the coffin, hung in the air, pointed at Huang Mao's mobile phone screen, and at Ji Li's face. A dead end, it's about to happen. Ji Li threw the phone away, but the feeling of throbbing in his heart still didn't disappear. On the contrary, the whole body was beginning to be enveloped by alternative coldness. A hand stretched out from the coffin again, grabbed his long hair, and dragged it all the way to the position of the coffin. Ji Li was anxious, and cut the strand of hair with a knife back, and then scrambled forward to flee, but was immediately caught back by that hand. In a critical situation, he lifted his shirt and put it on his head to block his face. Then, his only palm digged a raised stone on the ground, barely blocking the attack of the ghost. But it's just a procrastination. After experiencing several missions, he immediately understood that this showed that he was on the verge of a dead end. Maybe it's just a hurried side, the ghost is not enough to outline his entire face as a portrait. So, he did not die immediately like Huang Mao and others, but gave a little respite. With all his strength, he lay on the ground, grabbed the stone with his hands, and put his feet on the coffin board, reaching a barely balance. Smash that frame directly! The second personality fell into a mania, screaming in Ji Li's mind. Absolutely not! The frame is the carrier of ghosts, it cannot be destroyed. The third personality began to calmly analyze and put forward another solution. Now that there is less than half of the time until the end of the mission, is it feasible to keep blocking the face like this, wrestling with the ghost, and delaying until the end of the mission? Ji Li was also very anxious. The face covered by the cloth was covered with sweat, but the coldness around him had not disappeared. He is almost certain that the empty frame will stop in front of him, only to wait until he is completely exposed or the mission time is over. After hearing the third personality's proposal, he retorted in a deep voice, "Impossible, I have lost most of my strength due to the injury of my left wrist, and I can't hold on for 3 hours. And what you said can only be regarded as avoiding the dead end, but the task requirement is to find a way out to pick up the ghost. Otherwise, after the 3-hour mission is over, the ghost is still there, and I can't escape this alley without the rules." In just a few thoughts, Ji Li and the two personalities have thought of several solutions in their hearts, but they are not enough to get out of the predicament. Ji Li frowned, barely stabilizing his mind. Now the way of life must have appeared, what is it that he has overlooked? And at this moment, his face covered with clothing felt a ray of light. Light! Light! Ji Li's mind suddenly thought of an anomaly that so far has no results. Why, in the second round, he was swept across his face by the empty frame without any cover, but he didn't die instantly. But there is a half-dead situation of wrestling with ghosts at this moment. Street lights. When I was attacked in the second round, the first thing I saw was not the frame, but a dazzling reflected light. The surface of the empty mirror frame is a glass. What it wants is to illuminate all the faces of living people. But it was precisely because I was standing under the street lamp at the time, so for the first time, the ghost image was blurred due to the reflection of the mirror, and it failed to fully reflect me. That's why I have reached this weird half-dead situation. The mist in Ji Li's heart was instantly broken, and all the clues gathered at this moment, forming a complete path to life. As long as the empty frame can no longer reflect on his face, it will completely break the dead end. Thus, a way of life is formed. Your bag. There is a flashlight in your bag. Just put it on top of your head and you will completely restrain the dead end of ghosts. It can no longer capture your face, only a blurred light source. The second personality has already died once with Ji Li. It is extremely afraid of that feeling. The moment it gets a way out, the madness clamors in Ji Li's mind. Needless to say, Ji Li has already taken action. Before the ghost shot, he clearly remembered that his backpack was open, not far below him, and now he was very close to him following the previous fight. Ji Li decisively gave up the wrestling with that hand, and his body was immediately dragged towards the coffin. But with his memory, he fumbled for the location of the package and hugged it into his arms. Quick! Only 3 seconds left. The third personality is now lost and calm, with a startled reminder. Ji Li held the backpack in his left arm and fumbled around with his right hand. 3. At the same time, Ji Li finally fumbled for something with an irregular shape. It felt cold to the touch, surrounded by bands, and he didn't have time to recognize it. 2. The last countdown appeared. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Ji Li pulled down the clothes, and at the moment his vision was restored, he suddenly lowered his head, not looking at the empty frame that was hanging in the air. 1. Most of Ji Li's body has been completely pulled into the coffin, and the hand holding him is the dead Huang Mao corpse. For half a second, turn on the flashlight and wear it on the top of your head. And as the carrier of ghosts, the empty frame of the frame is also facing his face at this time. But this time, Ji Li's eyes didn't dodge at all. There was 30W strong light on his head, and his face completely turned into a halo in the frame of the mirror. Explained from another angle, in the eyes of ghosts, the current Ji Li has no facial features at all, and it is even more impossible to outline a portrait of death. Pump! The empty frame swayed in the air for a moment and fell to the ground. In the white background image, a yellow-faced and thin old man suddenly appeared. He glanced hatefully at the living person standing in the coffin, and disappeared in a flash. The corpses of the 6, tall, thin, and yellow hairs who had stepped on Ji Li's feet disappeared. The people in white clothes in the funeral procession also disappeared, and the entire beggar alley no longer has any spiritual power. Ji Li lost all his strength. After holding on for so long, the left wrist that had lost too much blood had long been numb, and he fell to the ground feebly. While fainting, his cell phone vibrated and an email arrived on time. Tianhai Hotel, the 7th shop agent manager Ji Li successfully received the 3rd resident, met the upgrade conditions and became a 1-star hotel. Number 7 shop will expand the recruitment of 5 shop assistants to manage the hotel together with the shop manager. Note: before the 2 stars, the agent store manager could only create a reasonable rule to restrain the store staff, and there was no obvious difference in essence. You trademark can walk faster. My hands are gone again, it hurts me. Have you ever broken your hand before? Stop talking nonsense. This time it hurts more than last time. Ji Li was already unable to interfere with the noise of the 2 personalities in his mind, and with the empty frame under his armpit, he staggered towards the public toilet in front of him. Although the mission ended smoothly, he fell into a faint at the same time. If it weren't for another personality clamoring in his mind to wake him up, it is estimated that he has bleeds to death by now. Bang! The man with 3 shadows smashed open the door of the public toilet with his body and returned to the 7th branch of Tianhai Hotel. The warm wind dries the coolness of the autumn night, and a stream of unknown heat swept through the body in an instant, wrapping the Ji Li that fell to the ground. Congratulations to Tianhai Hotel, Mr. Ji Li, the agent manager of the number 7 shop, for successfully completing the task and returning. Number 7 shop has been promoted from the normal level to a 1-star hotel, with an increase of 5 shop assistants. Before the 2 stars, it adopted the form of deads filling the vacancy, which was fixed at the 6% standard. The new clerk will arrive in the hotel lobby on time at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Mr. Ji Li, please think of a reasonable management rule before the new clerk enters the job. I wish you a happy life. Ji Li looked at the broken left hand, and began to grow flesh and bones at a speed visible to the naked eye. He turned a blind eye to this strange situation and set his eyes on the empty mirror frame. This is the ghost he brought in this time. Oh, don't move, don't move. A little numb, a little itchy, almost healed. The slightly weird voice of the second personality echoed in his ears. Ji Li frowned, but did not speak. He looked at the empty mirror frame representing ghosts, which hung on the ground out of thin air, and a line of small characters suddenly appeared on the reverse side, Household 203. Then disappeared completely before his eyes, and there was a muffled sound of the door on the 2nd floor. Ji Li breathed a sigh of relief. Tianhai Hotel has accepted this new tenant, and his task is completely completed. Only then did he finally have the opportunity to take out his phone and watch the new email. Went upstairs to inspect the situation of the 3 ghost tenants, thinking in his heart. Ji Li has always attributed the previous failure to lack of manpower. In that failed mission, he had clearly grasped the way of life, but he failed because he didn't have enough manpower and time to complete it. Now that the hotel has been promoted to 1 star, he has 5 teammates, adding a lot of operability for future tasks. The promenade on the 2nd floor was filled with a strange coldness. Ji Li could feel the ghosts 205 and 210. He was a little eager to move in with the new ghosts of 203. Ji Li stood at the end of the corridor, his eyes deep. He never figured out what the value of the hotel's supervisory responsibility for the staff is. Judging from the current situation, the ghost tenants do not really obey the discipline, and have the intention of fleeing outside every day, although this situation will act as an obstruction as the staff stops. But can people really limit ghosts? Ji Li looked back blankly, pressed his hands on the escalator, and looked at the 17 portraits of the store manager in the middle of the hall. Why, when the staff in the hotel died, the ghost tenants were also cleared. People die when they die, but where did the households of the past go? Jilly, can you tell me what is going on now? The voice of the third person, who was always calm in his ear, interrupted his unanswered thinking. Ji Li sighed, turned upstairs, returned to his own room, sat in front of the computer, and began to whisper everything. After a long time, the third person accepted all this silently. In other words, I changed from a psychiatrist to your subsidiary personality, and lost the right to be a person. I don't know why you have independent memory and will, which is not the second child. Ji Li rubbed his swollen temples. He still knows something about this supernatural hotel, but he is completely ignorant of his own mysterious and special attributes. Although the second personality is crazy and vulgar, but it does not show special, but the new third personality shows abnormal independence, which makes him a little uneasy. The third personality has a calm temperament, and it seems that there may not be any changes now. But what Ji Li is worried about is that if he dies in the future, he will give birth to a new personality, if he has an independent will, and he cannot distinguish good from bad. Then, the personality in his body will become time bombs, which will not only cause unexpected changes, but may even directly threaten his dominance. Come on, I suspect that the youngest has a bad brain. The new clerk will arrive at 10 o'clock tomorrow. As the store manager, we have to manage them well. The second personality breathed out and said in a dull voice. Ji Li nodded. The entry of the new clerk was a great thing for him. But he needs to get these newcomers to accept the current form as soon as possible, so as not to make foolish behaviors in the mission and cause the whole situation to collapse. I can create a hotel rule for management within a reasonable range. Which direction do you think would be better? Hearing this question, the two personalities became unified and calmed down, and Ji Li also bowed his head in thought. In fact, in a hotel, there is no shortage of material and wealth. Whatever you want, just say a word to the air, and it will appear in your cabinet. With everything available, Ji Li didn't know how to create rules. Remember what you did when you calculated Huang Mao and the others. The third personality spoke at this time, and Ji Li raised his brows. In the face of ghosts, human beings have no ability to block under the high pressure of death. Then it's just like you. It's normal to do some persecution because of fear of death. The words of the third personality are not fully explained, but Ji Li has fully understood it. It means to let himself create an internal constraint between human beings. Tian Hai, the rule I created is to forbid the staff to count each other. But Ji Li said this with a pause. Was subsequently changed to, internal fighting among staff is prohibited inside the hotel. The rules put forward by the agent Ji Li meet the standards and come true at this moment. Getting a response from the hotel, Ji Li nodded. He originally wanted to forbid humans from calculating with each other, but when I look back, he also didn't have the ability to resist ghosts. Then the situation of calculating other people in the task may still occur. From his point of view, all calculations depend on their abilities, but they must never reach into the hotel, or else the last piece of stability will disappear. It's all right, wait until tomorrow to see the newcomer, I'm exhausted. Ji Li still didn't rest, sat on a chair and lit a cigarette, staring at the corner with grey eyes. I'm still the agent manager. The hotel email said that there is no difference between the manager and the clerk. Does it mean that in the future, when I truly become the store manager, I will have special permissions? But then he shook his head again. The reason why I became the agent store manager is because I was the only one in the store at that time. Perhaps, there will be real store manager screening in the future. At that time, everyone needs to compete for name. Hotel. Tianhai. I. Ji Li. Early the next morning, Ji Li was already seated in the center of the hall. He did not rest too long last night, but sorted out 5 copies of the hotel rules and ghost details left by the past managers. Early in the morning, he sat on the solid wood chair in the lobby, closed his eyes and waited for the arrival of the new clerk. So, I have no choice. The slightly melancholy voice of the third personality sounded in Ji Li's mind. The second personality didn't move in the morning, and seemed to be still dormant. On the contrary, the third person had talked with Ji Li for a long time, and gradually accepted this helpless reality. Ji Li never opened his eyes. Hearing the words of the third child, his fingers trembled slightly, and he murmured, "None of us have to choose." On October 22, 2015, when the clock hand turned to 10 o'clock exactly, a unique beam suddenly appeared in the center of the hall. A dazzling and mysterious white light divided the Golden Hotel into 2 parts. When the light was weaker, 5 stubborn and bewildered figures appeared out of thin air at the entrance of the hotel. "Hold the grass! What's the situation?" A jealous young man with a non-mainstream haircut, shaking his nose and looking around blankly, his mouth was beautiful words. His reaction was normal, just astonished, but the 2 people around him were even more exaggerated. The young woman in an apron holding a bottle of soy sauce in her hand sat down on the ground, looking at the strange environment around her, and screaming constantly. Next to her was a young man who looked like a high school student. The 2 did not know each other, but they shrank into a ball. They were obviously shocked by the current situation. The most stable performance was a middle-aged man with a fair face, a slight beard, and glasses. In a dark grey tunic suit, he subconsciously stroked the black-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose while seeing everything in front of him, and stepped back, but he was not impatient. The dull and brilliant eyes looked at the Ji Li in the hall that was like dead wood. A thin young man beside him was even bolder. After scratching his head, he suddenly realized something. Even took out his cell phone from his arms and began to take pictures of hotel structures everywhere, still muttering to himself, not knowing what he was thinking about. After a brief period of confusion, the non-mainstream youth targeted Ji Li. "Who are you? You brought us here." As soon as these words came out, the scene quickly fell into a dead silence, and everyone's attention fell in the weird hotel with the words of the thin youth. Above the only independent figure, Ji Li slowly opened those grey eyes, his handsome but pale cheeks looked at the appearance of the 5 people, and smiled with satisfaction. But this smile in the eyes of these people has become another meaning. The young woman in the apron pulled the high school student back to the door of the hotel, slapped desperately, not daring to look at Ji Li at all. "What are you laughing at? What did you say? Didn't you hear it?" The non-mainstream youth has an abnormal temper, and seems to ignore Ji Li, a man who is seemingly decadent and lonely. Rushed up directly, grabbed Ji Li by the collar and pulled it up with brute force. "Say it! Isn't all this the ghost of you?" Ji Li didn't even look at the oncoming fist, his attention was always on the 2 unique men behind. It can be seen that there will be extraordinary existence among the 5 newcomers this time. Seeing Ji Li's ignorance, the anger of the non-mainstream youth rose even more, and he hit Ji Li's face with a punch. But then, in the eyes of everyone, his complexion suddenly turned red, and an abnormal fire seemed to gush out under his exposed skin. "What?" The non-mainstream youth, in less than 2 minutes into the hotel, turned into a mass of ashes under the eyes of everyone. Ji Li rubbed his slightly aching left cheek, then smiled lightly and said to the remaining 4, "Welcome to Tianhai Hotel." With the lessons learned from non-mainstream youths, everyone is settled down. During this time, Ji Li also got an overview of the current situation of the 4. The high school student's name is Cao Yuan. He was still in class and was suddenly pulled into the hotel to become a new clerk. The young woman in apron is a housewife named Ding Miaoxin. She was just making lunch at her house and was also sent in hastily. These 2 people can see that they have no special abilities, and they are very slow to receive information. The real purpose of Ji Li's side is that the remaining two people, a man in a tunic suit wearing glasses, named Fang Xinyan, is not surprising in appearance. According to him, he is a teacher. But Ji Li always feels that this person is a bit too calm, and the whole person's performance is not so much sane as it is stereotyped. Besides, he could feel the death spirit surrounding this man. And the bold and thin youth is called Yu Guo. Is an outdoor broadcaster himself, and his previous job was to explore various gloomy locations. The moment he came to the hotel before, he took out his phone to open the live broadcast. We are all cursed? Cao Yuan asked in a trembling voice as he kept spinning his legs. Ding Mioxin was even more unbearable. She was already sitting on the ground, staring straight at the ceiling, without saying a word. Only Fang Xinyan and Yu Guo were able to stand still, listening to Ji Li's narrative in a stable mind. Ji Li nodded, handed out the envelope in his hand to everyone, and said softly, "The thing is such a thing, I can only say that what you have to do now is to accept your fate, and then carefully study the ghost rules in the envelope, otherwise one mission will be enough to kill you." The other people still have a lot to ask, but they are all sent upstairs by Ji Li. While walking, Fang Xinyan suddenly stopped, turned to look at Ji Li and asked, "Are you the manager of this hotel?" Ji Li took a deep look at him and replied softly, "At the moment, yes." The hustle and bustle in the hall has just passed, leaving only Ji Li and the dead ashes. He looked towards the center of the hall with his hands on his shoulders. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Due to the death of a non-mainstream youth, according to the Tianhai Hotel's previous statement, there should be people who can fill the gap. Fang Xinyan, people are just like their names. I can see that he is full of doubts, but he is extremely restrained. Among the four, he is the only one who has the most insight into the current form. It seems that he wants to understand the rules of hotels and ghosts before coming to you. The third personality silently analyzes several newcomers. Ji Li nodded. Apart from him, I think Yu Guo is pretty good. At that time, everyone looked away from the death of the non-mainstream youth. Only he was boldly observing, but I didn't explain it, and he didn't ask much. This is a bold, careful, and sleek character. But waiting and waiting, Ji Li found something wrong. 10 minutes have passed since the death of a non-mainstream youth, but he has not been able to wait to fill the vacancy. This obviously violated the previous rules. Is it because people who died fighting in the hotel are not included in the rules for filling vacancies? Before Ji Li could understand what was going on, there was a tremor in his pocket. He immediately felt stunned, knowing that a new task had been released, and quickly took out his mobile phone. The dazzling cold light on the screen illuminates the pale face, and a lot of text messages appear on the black letters on the white background. Recipient, Tianhai Hotel, Number 7 Agent Store Manager Ji Li. Please arrive at Room 701, Unit 4, Building 2, Sanhe Community, in the eastern suburbs of this city before 8 o'clock in the evening on October 22, 2015. Surviving until 8 o'clock in the morning of the next day, it is counted as completing the task and receiving a new tenant. The person who fills up the vacancy has been waiting at the mission location, and you can go to the meeting. Sender, Tianhai. 301, this is Ji Li's room. The second floor is the residence of the ghost, and the third floor is where the staff are. As the agent manager, Ji Li has his room at the front. At this moment, the black shoulder bag full of applications was quietly placed on the chair, and Ji Li's pale face, which had never changed, was facing the window edge. In fact, Ji Li looks extraordinary, and there is a unique melancholy temperament between the soared eyebrows and the stars. It is a pity that the face is completely shrouded in haze, and it is extremely pale and looks slightly gloomy. The time is coming, this time with a few new people to help. I must not repeat the same mistakes. The coldness of the third personality alone echoed in his mind. Was immediately overwhelmed by the temperamental character of the second personality. His grandmother's Tianhai, never let Lao Tzu be idle for a moment. Just after a good night's sleep, he has another task. It's really a trademark horror. Ji Li did not speak, just glanced at his watch, turned around decisively, picked up the black bag, and went out. Ji Li stood on the silent promenade, took out the mobile phone issued by the hotel and began to tap the wall, which became a unique sound on the spot. Following his call, the door next door opened first, as if it had been waiting for a long time. Inside, Fang Xinyan's iconic figure in Chinese tunic suit took one step forward, without opening, but looking at Ji Li from a distance through the air. Old irons. I'm here again boldly. I haven't been able to make a live broadcast of Spirit Discovery every time before, but this time it's different. All rockets and cruise ships are ready for me. You are going to bleed heavily. Ji Li did not see him, first heard his voice. Yu Guo, a newcomer, is not the same as everyone else, he seems to be too nervous. In today's situation, he still starts the live broadcast, and Ji Li can't judge whether this person's joining is a good thing or a bad thing. It was Ding Mioxin and Cao Yuan who walked out the door tremblingly at last, and their performances truly conformed to normal people's reactions. One by one, the face was like frost, and the whole afternoon was like the end of the world. After receiving Tianhai's email, they had looked for Ji Li several times, but they were disappointed. Perhaps in their opinion, this time it can be said to have embarked on a road of no return. Ding Mioxin's eyes were red, and Cao Yuan supported her, and the two most fragile newcomers formed a group. Ji Li looked back at a glance, stopped saying anything, turned around and ran towards the hotel lobby. The second floor was still silent. This situation made Ji Li frowned. He stayed for a while, shook his head and ignored it. Generally, ghosts will not escape when the shop assistants are out on missions. This is also one of the unspoken rules summarized by the past generations of shop managers. The five people seem to have a lot of momentum, but in fact they are completely scattered. Ji Li stood on the street and thought for a while, but in the end he still did not choose to divide the car, but hired a van, and several people went together. The breeze in the autumn night slowly. Today is considered a good weather, people come and go on the street, and the after-images hurriedly passed by in front of Ji Li. My child is only 4 years old, and his dad is away all year round. If I can't survive this time, I won't even see them for the last time. Ding Mioxin started crying again. Cao Yuan whispered comfort, but his throat also began to choke. Brother Ji, can the 5 of us survive? Me and Miao Xin sister are 2 ordinary people. We have never done anything wrong in our entire life, so do we really have to bear these innocently? Ji Li listened to the words of the two, still staring straight at the scenery outside the window. In the afternoon before, he compared the content of the email with the newcomers. Discovered that because he is the agent of the store manager, he understands the situation of the person who fills the vacancy. But other people's mission information did not indicate that there was a 6th person waiting at the mission location. So Cao Yuan and others only thought that there were only 5 of them in this mission. Ji Li sighed in his heart. He didn't quite understand the feelings between families. He has lost all his memories. Although he can still retain his normal life instincts, he still cannot evoke any emotions about his family and emotions. It's like he is a person who appeared out of thin air, and he doesn't possess and understand the inextricable emotions of ordinary people. He couldn't answer Cao Yuan's question, but he said coldly, "Adjust your mind, it's coming soon." Fang Xinyan is like an old pine, sitting on a chair with a tight neck, and when he heard Ji Li's words, he turned his head and said rigidly, "How sure are you to survive?" "I don't know. This is the first mission after becoming a one-star hotel. The difficulty is no longer the same, otherwise you won't be drawn in." Fang nodded Xinyan and remained silent. In the depressed van, except for the driver who wiped cold sweat, only Yu Guo was still talking useless nonsense to the old irons in the live broadcast room. "Brothers! I'm here. Yu Guo didn't wait for Ji Li to speak, he jumped out of the car first, holding his mobile phone. He was not worried about the supernatural things he was about to face. Look, this is the Sanhe community in the eastern suburbs. It is already dilapidated and it is estimated to be an old building built more than 10 years ago. We are going to Unit 701, Building Number 2, but now, from the outside, Building Number 2 has the fewest residents, and it's only 8 o'clock but there are no residents with a light on. I heard people say that the 701 is a haunted house. As long as you go in, you can't come out alive. This time, I don't believe in this evil, but I have sacrificed my life for you. Brothers, give me some support and clear my inventory. Shouted out our slogan, if a man wants to mix well, he must boldly move forward. I went. Ding Mioxin glared at Yu Guo's nonsensical remarks, and Cao Yuan scratched his head in embarrassment. Ji Li wanted to stop Yu Guo's farce, but after thinking about it, he felt that it was not a good thing. The depressed atmosphere just now was indeed changed by him in a few words. Is just the second personality cursed roughly, Big XX. Time is coming, let's go to 701 first. Walking in the dusty old-fashioned corridor, Ji Li wiped the whiteout small advertisement, lingering for a moment on every floor. The 2 rooms on each floor seem to have residents, and there are even household garbage at the door. But from the outside, there is no one with a light on here. The footsteps of the 5 people's whirlpool and the more and more rapid panting, echoed in a small space. Ji Li has no worries about entering room 701, but he still hasn't seen the man who fills up the vacancy mentioned in the hotel's email. Could it be that she, is waiting for me in the room? Within a few steps, 5 shop assistants arrived at room 701. From the outside, this is a very simple room with couplets and New Year pictures on the door, which is not old. There is a carpet at the door, indicating that this place is inhabited. Ji Li turned around and looked at the 702 room opposite, where the door was locked and there was a pink doll bear hanging on the door. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. It looks like a girl with a girlish heart lives at the door. This makes him a little confused. The mission location is 701, but it doesn't seem to be a haunted place at all. Not only people live, but even the neighbors around them also exist. If there is something extraordinary, then the entire building number 2 has already been vacated. We arrived at the mission location, how to get in? Cao Yuan shrank timidly in the crowd, poking out his head and asked. Ji Li frowned and didn't know what to do. But Fang Xinyan, who was next to him, suddenly bent over, opened the stall on the ground, took out a copper-colored key from below in amazement, and placed it in front of Ji Li. Ji Li looked at the taciturn man in surprise, full of doubts. Don't look at me, most people are used to putting a spare key under the carpet, I just try. Ji Li has no life experience, and doesn't explore this point too much. He took the key and pierced the keyhole, twisted it slightly, and the door lock opened with a pop. Squeak! At the mission location, a gap was finally exposed, waiting for the entry of living people. Ji Li took a deep breath, said nothing, and stepped in first. The next few people either struggled or hesitated, but all entered the room before the task time was set. Ji Li stood slenderly at the door, watching the door danglingly close. Boom! The moment 701 was shut down, all the living people arrived at the mission location. But the third personality was just right in time and said something inexplicable. The door is closed, but I heard 2 overlapping sounds of closing doors. What do you mean by this? The saying of the third personality is very weird. Ji Li can roughly understand what it means, but I still want to hear a more intuitive explanation. Means that at the moment the door of room 701 is closed, another door is also closed at the same time. The 2 voices are almost completely overlapped. Ji Li blinked, and the solid wood door in front of him became deeper in his eyes. Suddenly, A large swath of red blood suddenly poured out from the 4 door cracks, at a strange speed, covering all the door panels in the blink of an eye, and drowned in the direction of Ji Li. There seems to be something that is about to swallow Ji Li into the sea of blood. Just as Ji Li's pupils had shrunk to the extreme, a hand was placed on his shoulder. Hey! Ji Li just came back to his senses, the door remained intact, there was no trace of blood, and the neat floor tiles under his feet were stepped on. What are you looking at? Fang Xinyan's warm face appeared, but his voice was rigid and numb, his usual awkward appearance. Ji Li shook his head, declaring that everything before that was just an illusion. Nothing. You check the layout of the room first. Fang Xinyan glanced suspiciously at Ji Li, and then walked into the depths of the room with the bewildered Ding Miaoxin and Cao Yuan. Yu Guo had already held up his mobile phone first and headed to the bathroom. His Ling Ling live broadcast was still continuing. In the living room of 701, only Ji Li was left, facing the empty door. Are you sure? Ji Li walked towards the door blankly and looked at the cat's eye. My 5 senses should be more sensitive than you and your second child, 80% sure. The third personality is telling the truth, as can be seen from the coffin mission last time. The existence of the third child made up for Ji Li's lack of insight. I don't believe it. The second personality has always liked to sing the opposite of the third personality, and it said rudely. You said that 2 door closing sounds appeared at the same time. Since they can be confused, obviously we need to be very close. But there are only 2 rooms 701 and 702 on the 7th floor. I have noticed that the door of room 702 is always closed and never opened. This is totally unreasonable. Ji Li listened to the dispute between the two of them, and did not interrupt, but slowly put his face on the cold door. Eyes meet the fuzzy cat eye door mirror. The line of sight in the corridor is slightly distorted, it looks like the world is blurred, but it is still clean. 702, there was dead silence, and the fan doll on the dark gate did not sway. After a long time, Ji Li turned around and looked at the clean room in the living room that seemed to be uninhabited. 701 is a layout of 2 rooms and 1 hall. All aspects are very ordinary, there is nothing worth noting at all. Ji Li walks in the living room, if you really want to single out an unusual point. That is, the room is so clean. But this is clean, not that it looks brand new. Is all the furnishings in the room, with great attention to cleanliness. Everything is placed in a reasonable position, and there is no trace of dust. The curtain on the sofa does not have the slightest wrinkle. But from the slight yellowing on the walls and ceiling, it can be seen that an old smoker once lived here, and it has not been short of time. Ji Li touched the top of a TV set, twisted his fingers, and couldn't help wondering in secret what kind of person the owner of the room would be. At the same time, Yu Guo got out of the bathroom with his mobile phone. Don't be disappointed, old iron. Although this house does not look like a haunted place, I can use my personality to guarantee that there will definitely be very scary things here later. Hey! Don't go! Look at the female anchor next door, don't! Yu Guo's face sank, he turned off his phone, looked at Ji Li and sighed and said, it doesn't look like a haunted place at all. I searched the bathroom all over, and there is nothing related to ghosts. Now the old irons are all gone. He sat down on the sofa dejectedly. If I hadn't seen the 3 ghosts on the 2nd floor of the hotel with my own eyes, I would have never believed what you said. Ji Li did not speak, but took out the cigarette case from his pocket, took a cigarette out and held it to his mouth, got up and walked to the kitchen. The kitchen environment is even less popular than the living room. The cold-colored tiles illuminate Ji Li's face. With the cold appearance, it can be seen that no one has made a fire to cook for a long time. Ji Li frowned and pushed open the kitchen window while smoking a cigarette. The night wind was blowing his long hair, and his expression became even more dazed. The hotel email said clearly. The 6th person who fills the vacancy will be waiting at the mission location, but here is empty. Ji Li walked out of the kitchen with nothing, the other 3 walked out of the 2 bedrooms, and 5 shop assistants gathered in the center of the living room. Fang Xinyan looked at Ji Li, who was surrounded by smoke, and became addicted to cigarettes. He lit his cigarette and said, "The 2 bedrooms are intact as before. I have searched all the locations, but I didn't find anything at first sight. But, I think the owner of this house should be a couple or couple living together." Ji Li was smoking a cigarette, and when he heard this, he was energetic. He raised his head and looked at Fang Xinyan and asked, "Talk about it." In the 2 bedrooms, the second bedroom is totally unoccupied, as can be seen from the empty closet. But in the master bedroom, there is a bit of sweat on the corner of the bed sheet, and the wardrobe is also a mix of men and women. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Generally speaking, men's sweat is much more developed. When lying naked on the bed sheet, imprints will appear over time. When Ji Li saw Fang Xinyan speaking, Ding Miaoxin definitely nodded. 2 people who have been married have explained this, so there should be nothing wrong. But it looks like they are moving, and the furnishings in the room have obviously been cleaned up. No way. Yu Guo, who had not spoken at this time, frowned and said, "Your statement is wrong." "Why?" "Because, in the bathroom, I only found a set of toiletries, and the characteristics are obviously men." Yu Guo looked at Fang Xinyan, who was sullenly smoking, and then pointed to the door with his finger. "There are not a pair of shoes on the shoe rack. I flipped through the trash can in the bathroom, and even the packaging bags were thrown away." Everything identifying the identity was very vague. Fang Xinyan's white face was a little confused, he didn't quite understand. He meant that everything in the room was cleaned up, why are there residues in the bedroom and men's supplies in the bathroom? Ji Li squeezed out the cigarette and straightened up from the sofa. Everyone present was dragged into the whirlpool of silence by Ji Li's words. Ji Li glanced at Yu Guo with a faint smile. He didn't expect this seemingly careless young man to change his mind so quickly. "This room is the mission location, and everything we find may be mission clues. What is left of the house now, maybe this is the reminder of the hotel for us." Fang Xinyan pushed the glasses on the bridge of his nose, looked up after a moment of silence and said, "To examine the true identity of the owner of the house." "Yes, yes." Yu Guo slapped his face abruptly, smiled and rushed to Fang Xinyan's side, and put his hand on it in a familiar way. Ji Li wrapped his windbreaker, bowed his head towards the direction of the master bedroom, and said as he walked, "The owner of this room should be a man, maybe it's a bit unique." Hearing this, the following people looked at each other, a little puzzled, but Fang Xinyan's eyes flashed. Ji Li looked at the bedroom exuding a special fragrance, frowned, and had some discomfort in his nose. "This smell is sweet and greasy." He gently opened the door of the cabinet, and inside were scattered all kinds of clothing, including men's and women's. Ji Li did not speak, put on his gloves quietly, arranged all the clothes in the closet, and put them on the bed one by one. Several clothes and trousers of different colors and styles lay on the bed, with one corner hanging down on the ground, looking like soft corpses. Men's clothes are on the left, women's clothes are on the right. Ji Li rubbed his nose, pointed them one by one, and said softly, "Did you find it?" Cao Yuan poked his head out at the end and said startledly, "Women's clothes are only half of men's, and most of them are underwear." Fang Xinyan nodded and said apologetically, "I was disturbed by the clothes piled together in the cabinet, and analysis is not strictly forbidden." Ji Li waved his hand to indicate that it was okay, and then circled the clothes a few times. "It is almost certain now that the owner of the house is a male, and it is a psychologically distorted pervert." When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but glance at the messy lady's clothes again. Ding Miaoxin's complexion flushed even more, with the back of her hand holding her mouth, a little retching. Tremblingly said, "Then, these ladies' clothes." Ji Li stopped and nodded, "It should be stolen." Yu Guo grinned around the room a few times, then sat down on the head of the bed, shaking the whole bed. Crunch interrupted the discussion between Ji Li and others. Yu Guo's expression was startled. He looked at Ji Li's pale face, and quickly got up. I just sat for a while, why is this bed so weak? He touched the pillow under his butt, as if he had fumbled for something hard, and then took the pillow apart. A black notebook appeared in the palm of his hand. Ji Li and Fang Xinyan took a few steps forward, but Cao Yuan and Ding Mioxin did not dare to act rashly and stayed where they were. Yu Guo flipped through it casually. At first he didn't care too much, but then the more he looked down, his expression became worse. Fang Xinyan stepped forward blankly and asked, "What's the matter?" Yu Guo handed over the notes in hand, and said in a deep voice, "This is the perverted man, peeping diary." The conversation between the two of them was heard in Ji Li's ears, but he didn't ask much. Instead, he walked around the head of the bed, then narrowed his eyes, as if he had found something. Ji Li waved his hand and told Fang Xinyan and Yu Guo to lean on the side, pushing the bed vigorously. There is a gap between the head of the bed and the wall. He was surprised to find that there was a faint light seeping through the wall. Yu Guo raised his head, looked at Ji Li and asked, "The breakthrough progress has come so quickly. How can Ji Li take care of him when he has time?" So he directly called Fang Xinyan and Cao Yuan, together with Yu Guo, and carried the whole bed to the other side. Now on the eastern wall, all the places covered by the bedside were exposed. Ding Mioxin, go and turn off the light in the bedroom. Ji Li didn't dare to move lightly. He didn't know where the unusual beam came from, or what was behind the wall, so he could only proceed with caution. Ding Mioxin said "Oh," walked to the door to turn off the light, and then leaned against the door, not daring to move. The 5 living people of 701 were all plunged into darkness. But the light beam on the east wall also appeared brighter and brighter. "This is a hole." Cao Yuan rubbed his forehead, couldn't help taking a step forward, but was immediately stopped by Ji Li. From the perspective of the structure of the corridor surface, the master bedroom of 701 should be connected to the side of 702. Ji Li's faint voice sounded slowly, explaining everything at present. "I had noticed the situation of 702 at the time. There was a pink doll on the door, presumably a young woman lived in it. If you think of it again, the perverted man in 701, the stolen lady's clothes." Fang Xinyan's lens was dazzled by the light and turned cold white, and he whispered, 701 lives a perverted man with a distorted psychology. His master bedroom and room 702 are separated by a wall. So he cut through the wall of the bedside, just to watch the young woman get off work, wash, and sleep at midnight. Fang Xinyan said this in a calm voice, but when the others heard this, they didn't realize that their necks were cold. Ji Li was not far away, staring at the entrance of the hole, and said to Fang Xinyan, "Read the contents of the diary." Fang Xinyan took a deep breath, his voice tactfully and lowly, pouring out the sinful and dirty texts little by little. "From the moment that person moved next door, I was completely desolate. I have a disease, and if I don't see that person for a moment, I'll burn myself and my 6 few organs. I want to see him every day and every time, so I made a hole in the east wall. I sleep at 701, Ta sleeps at 702. I look at him, can he feel me? Maybe the woman in that room never noticed all of this. She still lived alone as before, and only believed that the stolen clothes were misplaced. Is not clear at all, there is a cloudy and greasy eye, peeping at her life every day and every moment. What? Just as the footsteps of 5 people unnaturally moved towards the entrance of the cave, a vague and stern scream suddenly came. Comes from, it is 702 just separated by a wall. Ji Li hesitated for a moment, then looked down at his watch, and it was already 8:32. In theory, ghosts may appear at any time. Chong 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 chong. You are afraid of being a Harry, if you don't enter the tiger's lair, you will get a tiger, there must be something next door. The second personality Frizzy urged Ji Li in his mind. No, I've long felt that 702's situation is not right. Now the spearhead of this mission is these two adjacent rooms, absolutely can't be it. The third personality desperately prevented Ji Li. Fang Xinyan cleared his throat in a dull voice, sweating on his forehead, but still quickly flipping through his notes, looking for useful information other than love words and reading it out. Ta will arrive home on time at 6:34 every day. The pink doll on the door is a set of Ta's mobile phone case. Unfortunately, I searched the internet and couldn't find the same one. I have watched him and lived for a long time. Ta's habit is to open the bedroom window before going to work every day, which also provides me with convenience. Let me, Kin, go to Ta's bed to sleep peacefully, hold Ta's clothes, take away the things I want to take. The perverted behaviors in the diary have intensified. At the same time, the quarrel next door is getting louder and louder. It seems that there is a man and a woman, and there is a fierce conflict. The cry of the woman and the roar of the man made the nerves of the 5 staff members collapse to the strongest. Just as everyone was in a dilemma, Ji Li suddenly spoke. "Yu Guo, use your phone to block the entrance of the cave." Yu Guo was taken aback when he heard the words, but immediately reacted and rushed towards the east wall. Turned on the mobile phone used for live broadcast and pointed the camera at the gap. Inside the cylindrical pitch-black edge, it is a cold white scene, blurry, like a black and white video. Ji Li squatted on the ground with his breath, watching what happened next door without blinking. The more he watched, the more his scalp numb. There is also a bedroom. A woman in a long skirt, lying on the bed with her head disheveled, can't see her face completely, but the head is exaggerated and twisted, all proclaiming that she is dead. This Ding Mioxin was sore and limp. She sat down on the ground and was about to scream with her mouth wide open. Fortunately, Fang Xinyan covered her mouth in time. The cold sweats of Cao Yuan and Yu Guo have come down. They are all ordinary people. Now they have not seen any ghosts, but they have witnessed a murder case first. How can they not be frightened? Fang Xinyan paused for a long time. He didn't continue reading the book www.yuyuganshu.com, and the whole 701 fell into dead silence. The tone was always held on Ji Li's chest, and he didn't dare to go up or down. The incident happened suddenly, although he was smart enough, he was still a step late. The woman has died, he has missed the process of the crime and the murderer. He is 100% sure in his heart that this is definitely not a simple killing. Everything is related to the ghost that has never appeared. Yu Guo's arm is already sore, but Ji Li still wants to wait to see if there is any follow-up. After all, killing and throwing corpses should be connected in series. 1 minute, 2 minutes. 5 minutes passed, Ji Li could no longer hold his breath, but as time went on, besides the newly dead female corpse, there was no change in the next door. After waiting enough time, the remaining 4 finally breathed a sigh of relief. After all, what they have to face is not a murderer, but a ghost. Only Ji Li licked his dry lips. Missing the clue made him a little helpless. Fang Xinyan raised his eyes and glanced at the people with different faces, closed the notes, and looked at the hole connected to 702. Read out the last page word by word. He found me. I'm dead, I'm going to find him. Boom. There was a bumping muffled sound on the wall next door. Was so scared that Yu Guo's arm shook, and the phone attached to the entrance of the hole also shook. But Ji Li was still in the gloom and saw the scene that made his soul tremble. A bloodshot eyeball, turbid and sluggish with endless ferocity, went straight through the peeping hole and stared at him.